Now we are. Wonderful. Perfect. So welcome everyone. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes for people to come in. But welcome to Tropicalfete's Authors Connecting program with myself and Stanley Fritz. How are you, Stanley? You good?
So far, I'm pretty good, yeah. It's been hot, but it hasn't been unbearably hot. It's been nice to me, I think. How about you?
Today's tolerable.
Yeah.
Today's tolerable. Earlier this week, that's a different story.
Yeah. Like, I wore pants today instead of shorts, and I was like, oh, I'm not dying. This is good.
We love it.
Yeah.
We love
So you take the wins where you can get them.
That's it.
Yeah.
I agree, Stanley.
See?
I agree. Speaking of wins, you've been winning a lot lately. Yeah.
Yeah. No complaints over here.
We love that for you.
Exactly, Esquire. I was about to call you Dr. Esquire. I was like,
Dr. Esquire, whatever you want to call me. Both are fitting. Both are fitting.
Exactly.
I'm just going to wait 2 more minutes, Stanley, and then we will get started. We'll start at 6:05 exactly.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
So
I mean, the singing.
I can't help it, like you gotta have a song, you gotta have a theme song or something.
What's your theme song?
Right now, that's a tough one. You see, you asked me that question after I talked to that drunk about having a theme song. I guess if I had to pick a theme song right now, it would be Kendrick Lamar's "Count Me Out."
I think I heard that song.
Yeah.
I think I heard.
What about you?
Put me onto that song.
I probably did.
You put me onto that song.
Listen, I've been singing the gospel of Kendrick Lamar since like 2018.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Wow.
I'm definitely a fan. Not the one he described for Drake.
Oh gosh, let's not even not even get into that.
Yeah.
I heard he took down all of his songs.
Apparently, he has a new diss track coming out against Drake. Against J. Cole for when J. Cole puts out his. I mean, not J. Cole. Kendrick, for when Kendrick puts out his album.
Ay. All right.
Yeah. Some people don't learn, no.
Some people just do not learn. You're absolutely right about that. All right, we'll give everyone 1 more minute and then we will start.
Okay. You see, I had my book on the shelf. I was like, okay, so folks can see it, but now it's just right here.
I love it.
Here we go.
All right, everyone. Welcome again. My name is Katherine Charles, and I will be the moderator, interviewer this evening, interviewing my good friend, Stanley Fritz. Hi, Stanley.
Hey, Katherine. How are you today?
I was waiting for her.
Yeah, I was like, I muted myself by accident.
Oh, okay. This month is Caribbean American Heritage Month, and Tropicalfete has been celebrating a lot of Caribbean authors. Stanley, who is of Caribbean descent, is here to talk about his book, Confessions of a Sucker for Love. But let me introduce Stanley. So I'm going to read Stanley's bio. Stanley is a community organizer, writer, music lover, and part-time armchair lefty. As the son of immigrant parents, Stanley has always had an interest in politics and a flair for social justice. After graduating from Old Westbury University in 2010, he began a community organizing and issue advocacy career, focusing on criminal justice reform and democracy. As a writer, Stanley uses his newsletter to talk to anyone who will listen. He likes to use stories, personal experiences, music, and his world observations to talk through challenges that hopefully get readers to think. His newsletter, Let's Not Be Trash, can be found on Substack. Its goal is to speak about patriarchy, race, politics, and identity in a way anyone can understand. Born in Brooklyn, New York, to immigrant parents, Stanley grew up in East New York in Brownsville. He graduated from SUNY Old Westbury in 2010 with a bachelor's in English. All right, Stanley Fritz. All right, Brooklynite. So let's get right into it. So, born and raised in Brooklyn, I just want to give our viewers some background, some context about you, and then we'll get into your book. So, born and raised in Brooklyn, of Caribbean descent. Give us some more information about you.
Sure. So my mom's from Haiti. My dad is from Dominica, not Dominican Republic, Dominica, which is a small island in which, like, close to Saint Martin in Puerto Rico. And I was born in the late 80s. And, I was raised by my father because Ronald Reagan had a thing about immigrants and deported a bunch of them, and Haitians were at the top of that list. But much of my experience has been colored by being raised by my father and growing up in Brooklyn in what I think is a very particular time to be a Black boy trying to become a Black man in America and in New York. So the way that I show up, the way that I think, the way that I exist is really colored by that experience, those lessons, and the cycles, trying to break.
Okay. Give us some insight into your relationship with your parents. You said your mother's from Haiti, your father's from Dominica. How was that growing up?
It was really interesting because growing up in New York City, particularly in Brooklyn in the 90s, in East New York, but especially East Flatbush, I was just like, you would have thought you were like, it was all around Caribbean people. So I was deeply ingrained in the culture. And for my first couple of years, when my mom got deported and my dad was here, he kind of like dumped me off in what I call like an unofficial foster care of just cousins and aunties and friends. So I bounced around from family to family for a while. My father and I, we have a pretty good relationship now. My mom, we actually lost touch for a long time because, obviously she's very poor and she didn't have internet or a social media account. So we lost touch until maybe 2020.
Mm.
Now we've reconnected and her English is very poor and my Creole is atrocious. So I'm relearning Creole to try to kind of get back to it. And my dad's been very encouraging of that. And because he's not a fan of Trump, left the United States in 2021 to go to Uganda.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Really interesting story, but I feel like my experience in America has been like a cocktail of Afro-Caribbean Blackness with the African American experience trickled in all across.
Okay. So is it safe to say that you had more of a physical relationship or physical upbringing with your father than your mother, being that your father was in the States?
Yeah, absolutely. I spent one summer with my mom when I was 8 years old when I went to Haiti, and that was a wonderful summer. But then, we tried to file for her. We couldn't bring her back. And then after that, I didn't grow up with her at all.
Okay. So we have a Caribbean man, a young Caribbean man living in Brooklyn, trying to navigate life, right? As a young, impressionable boy, teenager. Talk to me about your relationship with your father when it comes to obtaining advice about relationships, woman, love, masculinity.
Oh, man. So I love my dad. My dad means well. How can I say this? His idea of good advice was essentially two things. One, you never date or get with the woman that you like more than she likes you. You find somebody who likes you more than you like her, and you be with her. And the other thing that he said was, you're a man, so it's impossible for you to have only one woman. So what you need to do is make sure that you are paying the bills and that you make enough money. But then once you do that, you can do whatever you want to do. And every man just wants to, you want to have sex. If you don't want to have sex all the time with a bunch of different women, something's wrong with you, or you might be gay. Those are kind of his relationship rules. As a man, you have no worth unless you produce something. So you better work.
Right. Well, that's a very interesting perspective and interesting insight for you to take on. So you're receiving this advice, you're receiving these words from your father. I want to get into how his words and his perspective has influenced you, right? Growing up during this time. What did you do? Did you ever document anything as far as writing, listening to music therapy, anything to that nature as you were going through the motions of life?
Yeah, so therapy, of course not, because Black folks wasn't going to therapy, particularly in the Caribbean household. You wasn't going to therapy because if you need therapy, the demons are speaking to you while you sleep, and that's a whole different problem that only Jesus can solve. But I worshiped my dad. He was the greatest person in the world, and I love my dad. So wonderful man. I think I just have a much sober idea of like who he is, and he was someone who had a very particular idea about manhood, about relationships, about love. And, he did his best. He gave me what he had, but it wasn't the healthiest. And so there was a lot of shame growing up because he was, very judgmental. And he was also very he was the kind of person that would just shut down or blow up. And I was growing up in a household where I had that on my father's side. And then my stepmother, once again, also a wonderful woman in many ways and very caring, but she could only give me what she had. And she was physically abusive and verbally abusive. So I grew up in a household where I was getting physically abused and verbally abused, told I was stupid, I was ugly, I wasn't worth anything. And then my dad, who would give me the silent treatment if I wasn't acting like a man. I remember I was 9 years old, and he first threatened to kick me out of the house, and then he gave me the silent treatment because I wasn't being man enough. And the way that I had to figure out how to navigate whatever feelings I had, because I couldn't express them externally, right?
Yeah.
Because the people in my life, once again, they gave me what they had, but they could not regulate their emotions, and then they would not allow me to express mine. I had an old radio in my room with a cassette and a CD player. Didn't work, but it was on Hot 97. So I would listen to Hot 97, Angie Martinez at 6 o'clock, DJ Red Alert with a 5 o'clock free ride. And I had a journal that a teacher gave me, and I would just write in the journal. And just I don't even remember particular things I would write. I would just write whatever I was feeling, what had happened, because an interesting thing about growing up in that household was they saw you. My parents saw me, but they didn't really see me.
Right.
I was a child, but they weren't actually interested in who I was or what I was doing. So nobody was ever going to look into it. And that was kind of how I managed and how I coped.
On that note, I want to transition into your book, because I feel like your book explores how you navigated masculinity, being a young Caribbean man living in Brooklyn, and all the different adversities that you overcame. So let's talk about Confessions of a Sucker for Love.
Yeah.
Tell us about the book, Stanley. How did you come up with this, or what influenced you, I should say, to write this book?
So, I wrote this book at a very different time in my life. I was 22, 23. And, I had still not fully learned how to process my emotions or even acknowledge that I had any, hadn't gone to therapy yet, and was very much a lover boy, deeply interested in being in love and wanting to be loved. So that was, and I was going through this world where everyone was telling you that men don't want love, men don't want relationships, men don't deserve that, and feeling frustrated. And then the only places, the things that I went to for refuge were music, books, movies, right? All the movies, all the men were white. And they weren't I love the movie High Fidelity, but that's an angry white man with his angry white friends in a record store complaining because he cheated on his girlfriend and doesn't understand why she's mad at him.
Yeah.
Or another movie I watched, I think My Last Five Girlfriends, another white man in England, so I relate even less, is going over his last couple of breakups. And I'm I wish there was somebody who could do this, but in my voice. And a quote from Toni Morrison, who said that she read books until she was 39, and she was always looking for stories. And then one day she realized the story she was looking for wasn't there because she had to create it. So I was okay, I'm gonna try this. And I was I'm gonna write this book about relationships and love from a male's perspective. And I'm gonna just kind of give advice. And then when I started to write it, like I said, I was young when I wrote the book, so it's funny. But when I started to write it, I started to process in real time. And the book ended up becoming a thing that really helped me to kind of heal some things and also to face some things as well.
I could see that, especially after reading the book in 2014 when it was first published. So Confessions of a Sucker for Love, it's a compilation of different characters, right? Or different women who were in your life at that time. I would like for you to tell us about one of the characters, or one of the women, I should say, that you mentioned in your book, and what effect that person had in your life at that time.
Yeah. So the book is about this guy named Eric, but it's mostly about me. Like I spruce some things up to make it interesting, but it's really about me. And I named the main character after my childhood best friend who passed away. So any writing I do with a short story, the main character, if it's a man, it's usually his name is Eric. But when I think back to like one of my favorite stories from that book was about Sharon, and it's towards the end of the book, and it talks about emotional terrorism. And really what I was talking about was gaslighting. I didn't have the words for it back then, but this girl was not into me. Maybe at one point she was into me, but she was no longer into me, and she was doing all the subtle things to show me she wasn't into me. This is like the 2010s, and she's not responding to my text messages, but then she's posting on Facebook and Twitter how turned on she is and how lonely she is, or how she had a good time with that guy. And then when I'm confronting her about it, she goes, "Oh, those are song lyrics." And it's just like just doing stuff like that. And there's one part in the book that I write about, which it's Valentine's Day, and I take her out to eat, and this actually happened too. Like some of the stuff in the book is not real. This part actually happened, which is why I bring it up. I took her out to eat, and I assume either her boyfriend or somebody she was talking to on the side was also there with another girl. And she was literally there sitting next to me at this fancy restaurant, aka Dallas BBQs, and like teasing because her man, not me, was sitting like right next to us with another woman. I was reading the book this morning to make sure I remember that part. And in the line, I was like, all I could do was angrily eat my sticky wings, which I thought was hilarious. But that happened because I wasn't choosing me. And also, we were young, so we didn't know how to communicate. So she didn't know how to communicate. And we just didn't communicate. We just hurt each other.
I want to talk about one of my favorite lines. I have a lot of favorite lines. There we go. In your book, but I want to talk about this one. It says newsflash. Okay. Newsflash. Oh, I've got some breaking news for you. Well, you might actually know this already, but I'll at least confirm your greatest fears. Women love bad boys. Take a second and think about this, because I'm 98% sure that women reading this are either shaking their heads in disgust or laughing because they know it's true. Talk to me about this. Talk to me about this line.
So once again, I was really young when I wrote this, but the truth of it, because I can thank goodness for therapy. I feel like I'm a lot better at like getting to the root of where things are coming from. I was hurt and I was bitter. And what I was feeling at that point was all these women who I like and like who I want to get close to. And you keep telling me, or I keep hearing these things you say you want, and I'm bringing it, but it's never good enough. I'm not the thing that you want. And there's a couple of things that are happening there. I can tell you now, or we can wait. You're going to tease it out. But
it's up to you. What do you want to do?
I'll just say, like, there's a couple of things that are happening there at that time. Is one, like, I know now that I was not interested in a lot of those women. I was interested in the idea of being loved. And you just like the kind of love that I was looking for, right? I was never going to find it in any of those women because I had to have it for myself, and I didn't. And I was projecting what I wanted for myself onto them. And then the other thing is those women didn't like me. And I had a habit of chasing after women who weren't interested in me because I didn't grow up with my mom. And the primary woman in my life was physically and verbally abusive for much of it. So if a woman wasn't treating me poorly, it was confusing. And, because I didn't know how to feel. I don't think I even started to learn how to feel, a process that I had real emotions until maybe 2019. And then the pandemic happens and the country shuts down. So you were forced to sit down and process it. So
all this time, it's the thing.
Yeah. But yeah, that's what was happening.
Okay. There's another part. It's interesting that I'm going to mention this part now after what you just mentioned. Another part in the book, it says hindsight is 2020. I dated a girl who did not respect me. That was my first mistake. But instead of leaving her or demanding respect, I stayed and tried to make things work. When I suspected something was wrong, I still stayed and ignored the piling warning signs. As things deteriorated, I became even more irrational and tried to manipulate her emotions through calculated actions. This was self destructive, and I dropped the ball by even trying to use it. So, at this point in your life, specifically after you wrote this portion of the book, right? At this point in your life, are you speaking to anyone about your relationships or your encounter with women or girls at that time and just trying to get some advice as far as what to do?
I mean, no one who knew what they were doing. I mean, like, I was just still like, it was still my dad who was like, I told you she was gonna do that. I told you got to do this. Or my friends who were like, yo, like, you stop worshiping these females, like they're not important. You know, music dictates everything. But like one of my friends, he's always like, yo, you love Hove, you never listen to Big Pimpin'. And the lyrics that Jay-Z says in the first verse of Big Pimpin', you know, I love him, squeeze him, fuck him, tease him, but I don't fucking need him. Sorry for the language, right? But like he's straight up saying like, you will never have me. We can have physical, but you'll never have me. And my friends were like giving them you. But when I reread that, I feel proud of myself that I could see that back then. Because in 2014 was like 24, 23, 24, 25, I don't remember. And the fact that like at least even back then I could like see that, I really credit the writing, because writing helps you to process and writing helps you to think. And I think the danger that a lot of men fall into is that we don't get taught how to process our feelings. We get told that our feelings are a problem. So you try to hold them. So you don't process and you don't think. So then when you do feel something, your mind tells you it's wrong. Because that's what happened to me in the first breakup. I talk about my high school sweetheart. I had all these feelings and I didn't know what to do with them. And I got really angry and resentful. But in 2012, 13, whenever I wrote that part, I was writing, so I was processing it, so I could see the role that I played. Whereas a lot of men, they put it back on a woman.
Right.
Resentful towards women. And you can see the language in the book. Like I still have a lot of that. Like I'm saying things where if you look at it objectively, you're like, well, Stan, like, why were you chasing that girl? Why did she do that? Or you were projecting. But the bitterness is there, so you put it on her. And I think that, you know, when I think about the psychology of abuse and how it shows up in a lot of men, 1 out of 3 Black women will be killed by an intimate partner. It's usually somebody they know. Black women are more likely to date Black men if they're dating an opposite, you know, in a heterosexual relationship, which means Black men are killing Black women. And these things are happening because a lot of Black men don't know how to process feelings. These Black men don't know how to understand what they're going through. They struggle to feel empathy for women because we learn to other them, because we're only taught to acknowledge them based on what they can do for us or to us. And then something happens and you feel a thing, you don't know what it is because you're only supposed to be able to process anger and lust. So this new thing, pain, is bad, and she did it. So now she has to pay. And so, yeah, seeing that I could see that back then and I could process and I could have accountability feels good to know now.
And I'm proud of you for even being able to identify that and to process that and to obviously move forward in a healthy way. There was another part of the book that I'm even wondering if I should even mention this part right now or after that portion, after what you just stated, which is, it's true, it's facts, right? Actually, this is a good pivot on introspection and a journey of self-discovery. So in the book you wrote, there was a time when I almost gave up. There was a moment, and to be quite honest, there was a couple of seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, and months where I felt like maybe the way I had been living was wrong. Maybe I shouldn't be so open about letting people into my life. Maybe I do get attached too fast. Maybe I do go after the wrong girls. And maybe I trust the wrong people. So you mentioned we were gradually talking about men's health, right? And June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. So I love the fact that we are concluding Caribbean Heritage Month with a conversation that's also coinciding with men's mental health. You're doing it already, but I want you to go a little more in depth as far as the journey, the emotional, mental journey that you've gone through either while you were writing the book or more specifically after the book, right? Because there's a lot of introspection, there's a lot of self-discovery. What things are you doing at that time? You mentioned therapy briefly, but what things are you doing at this time to make sure that you are navigating life in a more healthy way? Not even for relationships or women or anything like that, but just for self. What are you doing during this time for self-improvement?
The most important thing is trying to be present. And like that sounds like a corny thing. It doesn't sound like a real thing,
Okay.
but there's so many things in this world that allows us to not be present and we don't even realize it. One of the things I used to do, and I wrote about this, I wrote a piece about Diddy and like how someone who everyone loves could be an abuser. And I talked about how when I was younger and I was going through things, I used to disassociate. And I didn't know that's what I was doing because, like I'd be like, oh, I feel this pain, but I'm not supposed to feel this pain because I'm a man. So I'll just be like, I don't exist. The pain doesn't exist. There's nothing here. And I would convince myself of that. And like you're not present when you do that. You're almost erasing yourself in a way. Right. And you have to be present so you can feel. And even if it doesn't always feel great, you need that so you can have empathy and you can be in this world. So I try to be present. I try to go for walks to be with my body, particularly when I'm feeling like anxious. I walk, I move my body. I try to go ride my bike, listen to music. Try to be around friends. I try to monitor the amount of social media that I use. I love Twitter. I still use Twitter a lot. So if you see me on there in 5 minutes, don't judge me.
I'm judging.
Yeah, listen, God is still working on me, or Beyonce, whoever's up there. But I just try to create spaces for me to be present. I'm writing. I write almost every day, whether it's like I wake up in the morning and I write a line or inspiration hits me and I put something in my note. I'm always writing. It could be 1,000 words. It could be 1 word, but I'm writing. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to, I'm doing the work to love me because that's the most important thing. And that is the thing that, like you never get perfect at. Every day is an opportunity to like learn how to love yourself more and be more present for yourself. And if you love yourself and you're present for yourself and you're doing it the right way, you can love your people and you can be present for your people. And if you can learn to talk softly to yourself, which is something I've been working on for the last like 3 or 4 years now, the way you show up and speak to the people you love shifts. When I used to sit down in a room with myself and call myself stupid and ugly and I was a failure and I was weak and all those things, right? And that's how I talk to myself. And, it helped me to do things, right? Like I pushed through some stuff because I would just tell myself like, stop being weak, stop being a coward, whatever I would say. I would, I got through, but like at what cost? Right. And the last couple of years, like I've learned, and when my therapist said this to me, like the second session we had, he was like, talk softly to yourself. And I was like, I'm not about to flirt with myself. And he was like, men always think that softness is equated to flirting or sex. And it's like, it's not about that. It's about the way you talk to yourself is reflective to how you show up to other people. Absolutely. And if you can learn to give yourself empathy, you can be okay. You'll give it to others and like, you won't be so negative. And so like, I try to tell myself, I love you, Stan. Sometimes I feel silly about it. But like I'll look in the mirror and I'm like, I love you. And it makes me laugh because I feel like a cornball. But then even that is an endorphin hit. So it was good.
Yeah. But I feel like, I'm sorry, go ahead. Cut you off. I feel like society kind of teaches us not to do those things, right? Especially when we're just looking at men in general. The man has to be strong. He can't show emotion. I believe I just watched something online, a video online. I'm not going to say who's in the video. But that particular person was just like, don't show emotions. And the first thing that I did, I was just like cringing. Maybe I don't know the full context because it was just a snippet of the conversation that this person was having with someone else. But when he was just like, don't show emotion, don't do this. Maybe it's from a business aspect. But then when he said you could cry when, your child is born, you could cry during a funeral. I'm just like, I hear you, but that's also very destructive, especially for male, right? Because we're already in a society where all these stigmas are already placed on them. Um, but you already know, you know how I feel about therapy. So I'm just so happy to hear that you are just continuing the journey of self-improvement, of self-discovery. And you also mentioned on how showing up for yourself allows you to show up for other people. So I want to go into that a little further, but now going into the aspect of relationships, of masculinity, right? And love. How is that, right? Now that not even necessarily that you know yourself fully, because as you said, there are times where you think you know yourself and then all of a sudden life just hits you and makes you say, oh, wait a second, kind of makes you second guess, right? But at some point you're rediscovering yourself, you're gaining all this confidence, you're gaining love, right? And self-respect for yourself. How is that reflecting in your relationships with women? How's that reflecting in a sense of masculinity? Talk to me about that.
So it's been interesting. I mean, I feel like in my relationship with my partner, we are a constant work in progress, and that's good. But we can be a work in progress because we can communicate and we can show up for each other. And no matter what the relationship you're in, romantic, platonic, professional, it takes being present, being willing to speak, being even more willing to listen, then of course being willing to be accountable and make change. And I can do that now, or I'm in a better position to do that because I can see myself and I'm willing to see myself, right? And also because like I'm talking softly to myself, I try to show up with the kind of empathy that I would want. So that's good. I think my partner models that as well. And you know, like we have our moments, and she's still a Harlem girl. So sometimes people like, what are you doing? Because like society tells you men are supposed to be a certain way. The world, I don't know. I feel like doing this work has made me feel a lot more secure in myself. And I projected confidence before, but I think I'm confident. I would say I'm confident now. I have my insecurities, obviously, because I'm human, but I feel pretty self-assured about who I am. But what I have noticed is like I've had some experiences where like people consider me like we'll use weak as language. They'll consider me as weak or soft, or they like initially feel like they don't have to respect me because of the way that I'm showing up in spaces. Or like the things that I won't engage with anymore. Like I don't feel a need to prove to anybody that I'm a man. Like you never will be able to.
Right.
Because like whatever problem they have is not about you, it's about them. The things that trigger us about the people around us tend to be reflections of ourselves that we don't like.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there's not moments where I'm like, damn, like I know they're looking at me like I'm soft, or we're like, I'm penalized for not showing up a certain way. And I have a lot fewer male friends too because of it. But I really appreciate and value the ones that I do have.
I love that. So you're writing, you're going to therapy. What other sources or what other methods are you utilizing during this self-rediscovery, I want to call it, rediscovery period?
I'm leaning in on what I love, and I'm like being true to that. I love to write. I love to read, but I love to write. As you can see, I wrote a book in my 20s and self-published it because I had something to say. So I have a newsletter that I do with my friend Evan called Let's Not Be Trash. And it started after I put together a workshop for men to talk about like masculinity. So let me go back for a second. I had a friend who was in an abusive relationship. We tried to get her out. It didn't work. But he was the only man that I was the only man that he trusted her to be around. So like we would use me as an excuse to kind of get her out of the place in a way. And I got to know him a little bit. And there was a period where like we got cool. And I was like, this is a really nice guy. And like I thought that things were getting better until it wasn't. And things got really bad. And she finally did get away. But I remember I was asking myself the question of like, yo, I saw a lot of myself in him. I still do. And the question was like, how could like what was the shift that happened where he went this route and I went that route? And that part scared me because when I thought back to some of the stuff I felt and some of the stuff I said, if you read this book, like I have a lot of cringe moments reading the book because I'm like, oh, like I was on that pipeline.
But it was real. It was real. A lot of things that you were saying, that's what you were experiencing at the time. That's what you were thinking at the time.
Yeah.
Cringe, as you say it may be, it
Yeah.
was real life.
Yeah. Or like even like some of the things that I did, like love bombing. Oh, I was a love bomber. And I didn't realize like that was a trait of an abuser. Like now, like I know the characteristics of an abuser because like I've done my homework on it and I've been in these spaces. But back then I was doing that and I realized those things. So I was like, yo, if I could have easily been this guy, there's any guy could easily be this guy because I'm not special. So I asked a friend who I knew like had like organized with the Women's March for advice, and she connected me to this guy who does workshops about men. And we had a 6-week workshop where we talked about this thing called the man box. And what the man box is all the things that society tells you is a man on one side, and all the things that can happen to you and how you feel when you fail to reach those expectations.
Stanley, I'm sorry to cut you off. Can you just describe what love bombing is, just so that everyone knows and that they have context of that?
So there's a really good book too that talks about abuse and characteristics. I'll see if I can find it. But anyway, love bombing is essentially when like a man or any person in a relationship, particularly very early in a relationship, showers you with gifts and compliments and like all these good things. And like for someone who likes affirmations, that can be very, that can be very endearing and like bring you closer to them. But as a characteristic of an abuser, is some of the ways that they help to pull you in. And it's definitely a red flag. Like if you look up like characteristics of abuse, like love bombing is one of like the textbook of examples. Grand gestures, big gifts, because the relationship doesn't start off as abusive. It's like I'll compare it to a beat. Like it starts off like let's use like Lil Wayne's like the beat build. It doesn't start off with the whole 808 hit, and it starts off with then it builds up, then it hits a crescendo. And for a good chunk of the relationship, or at least in the early part, the male is looking to test the waters and slowly pull away layers, pull you away from the people that care about you, pull away from your own securities, create a different universe, get you comfortable and test the waters. And, by the time the first actual physical interaction happens, like a whole bunch of stuff that's already gone down, that's created the universe for you to be in there. Right. And that's why it's so hard to leave, because like you straight up have been getting manipulated. And that's not to say that all of this behavior is always 100% active in abusers. Like sometimes this is just the way you learn how to be, because society popularizes and mainstreams abusive behaviors. We describe healthy leadership as abuse. The way that we even talk about like the best leaders, all of that stuff is abuse. So society has a long way to go. But yeah, to answer the original question, love bombing is one of those first traits you'll see there.
I want to mention one of the comments that's in our chat. Mishka Bell said, as women, we have a role to play in providing a safe space for men to open up about their feelings without feeling emasculated. Thoughts?
Yeah, 100% agree. And like, we need help. We need support. I also want to say that it's not, how can I put this? I'll use white supremacy, for example. White people need to show up and be allies to help dismantle white supremacy. But like, it's not my job as a Black person to like carry your load for you. And also it's not my job as a Black person to coddle you. Having said that, the only way that white people will ever show up and be anti-racist in a real way is if they can understand how white supremacy hurts them. And we can support that, right? And we can create the space to help you process, but there's limits to it. Some of that we're going to have to do on our own.
Right. Ooh, Stanley, I want to go like on a whole conversation based on that, but let me refocus, I should say, on the book and our conversation on self-discovery and relationships and love. You talked about a program that you were part of. Do you recall the name of that program?
A program, shoot. Please refresh my memory.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Refresh my memory. Which program?
You just spoke about it. You said, I believe it was a couple of weeks, a program that was specific.
Oh, the men's workshop that I did. Yeah. Oh, I actually organized that. Yeah.
Oh, you organized it. How
did
you know this? Okay. Tell me more about it. Tell us about it.
So it's essentially, I just want to like sit down and talk with other men about like some of the ways we show up and figure things out. And it was actually, shout out to Carmen Perez. executive director of the Justice League and Gathering for Justice. This is when she was helping to organize a women's march. And she was like, I have this friend over here. He does these trainings. Y'all should connect. So I told him what I was looking to do. And he was like, I can do like these 6 workshops to help if you can organize them and bring them to a space. And Carmen allowed us to use her office space in the 1199 building. Shout out to 1199 SEIU, Union Strong. And we had about 10, 15 men in there. And we were sitting there, and every day would be a different workshop. So the first one was the man box. And the man box, there's a woman box too, but I'll unpack the man box for you guys real quick. The man box, essentially, he had his workshop where he draws a big rectangle, talking about a box, and he makes a line in between it. And he says, okay, let's put all the things that we know that we're supposed to do or be as men. Strong, powerful, providers, right? Aggressive, leaders, have all the answers, all those things. And then what are the things you're not supposed to be? Weak, soft, emotional, vulnerable, caring, all these things. Then he's like, what happens if you don't fit into this box in one way or another? And then we talked about the things that could happen. And I remember going through it with him and me and a few other guys there. Like, well, I'm still cool with a lot of those guys. We were answering the questions and at the same time realizing, like I never realized how much stress and anxiety I had about like what would happen to me or who would leave me if I could not do these things. There's so much pressure on men and boys. I mean, all these new guys not talking about their soft era. I like to make fun of it because, you know, just the Caribbean in me says any man who don't want to work and don't want to take care of a woman is weak, right? But let's park that aside. Let's park that aside. Yeah, but like men are told that they had to be providers. Men are told, and y'all may not agree, that we do not matter unless we provide something. Women, children, and the elderly get empathy. Men get nothing unless they can produce. Like living in a world in which racial white supremacy and capitalism has destroyed it and made it so that even like having the best job in the world, you might not be able to do the things you used to do back in the days. So now you cannot provide for yourself, let alone for another woman. You cannot establish leadership. You cannot, show yourself as a person on top. But then society's still telling you, you got to pay for the first date. You got to cover the bills. You got to do all these things. But you're like, I'm broke, I'm homeless, or I'm living with my parents and I'm depressed. So then the question becomes, well, whose fault is it? And with no analysis and no space to process your emotions, it becomes the fault of women. Right? And then also you're told that like there's only a handful of things you get in life. You get respect if you make money. You get respect if you have power, right? You get respect if you have money and power. You get women if you have money and power. You get rewarded with sex for doing all these things. Now you're doing these things and you're trying to do these things. You can't get them done. You can't get the money. You can't get the power. So now you don't have sex and you don't have women and you don't have respect when really what you want is love, but you're not allowed to think that. So now they're rebelling. And a lot of the men, what they're really saying is, I'm lonely and I'm sad. But, we don't have the language for that. So it's women's fault. That's why Kevin Samuels became big. That's why like Andrew Tate and all these like other people become big, because these men, like, we're lonely, we're scared, and the world is changing. So now we understand all the ways that women have struggled and suffered, and then like how we have to build equity into this world. And women are engaging and owning their power as women should be. But at the same time, everybody's screaming, men is trash. Nobody told me how to be better. Nobody gave us a rubric. Now men deserve less. Right? And I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong, but you told me my whole life I had to be a particular way. And I did that. Then all of a sudden the rules changed. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah. As you said, there's no rule book, there's no playbook. So it's really just navigating it on your own.
Yeah.
I know that music was also a great source for you as well, right? Because even within your book, in various chapters, you suggest or recommend some songs to listen to. some songs to listen to while you're going through, while you're reading through the book. Has music been influential to you now? As you just going through your self-love process? And if so, how?
Well, absolutely. And first off, shout out to my stepmother Terry. I just saw her in the chat, she's the reason music is so important to me, because when I was a kid, she used to always it would be at nighttime, we were asleep, and she'd be in the living room blasting her music, Tammy Terrell, Whitney Houston, Salt and Pepper, or like when she was cleaning, you always knew it was time to clean because you heard the oldies, and it became like, and I might be in my room, fake sleep, but jamming, and it became a big part of my life, and it stayed that way. And now today, music is a huge part of my life still. I listen to music every single day. I will carve out time to sit in the dark. Like, this is my office right now. I will close the door, turn off the lights, close my eyes, and listen to an album. Music is a way to reconnect on myself. It's a way, it's one of the ways I feel closest to God. It's a way to process things. Sometimes you don't have the words for things, and a song does. So when, back in 2011, when I was going through the bad breakup and I didn't have the language, it was Eminem's Superman, which is if you hear the song, it's
that's an interesting song. Yeah.
But then now there's a song on the Kendrick Lamar album, Mr. Morale and the Big Stepper, called Mother I Sober. Where
for that song too.
Yes, that song is a very powerful song, but it's a very sad song. It's beautiful though. He talks about, what I love about Kendrick Lamar is that like he says like he didn't know how to feel. So instead of feeling, he just had sex with a bunch of women and was violent. Right. And in Mother I Sober, he talks about when he stops drinking and he takes a step back and like he has to face himself and finally process why he was what he was and why he did what he did. And then at the end of the song, his fiance, Whitney, says, "Congratulations, you broke the cycle." Like, but some of the stuff he says in that song, where he was like, he says, "Sleeping with other women used to make me feel like a superhuman." Like, that's when he felt powerful. And I think about some of the ways that, like, not necessarily that, because a nigga told a joke, the women wasn't laughing, but like there was other things that I did where like they would, when I got attention, right, when I was kind of smart, it made me feel good. Those are the times. But like, because those are the only times I felt worthy, I went too deep in certain behaviors. And I know when I heard that song from Kendrick the first time, sitting on my couch in 2022, and I was just like, how does this man who I've never met before know exactly what I've been going through?
Because a lot of men also go through it, but again, they just sit in silence and put on this face for society.
Hello, somebody.
Ciao. You wrote many other books, many other novels, many other publications after Confessions of a Sucker for Love. Tell us about that.
So, not actually novels. I want to write another book, hopefully. Hopefully I get a book deal. So if a publisher's listening, cut me a check. I'll write you something. But I have my newsletter, Let's Not Be Trash. And it was started with one of the friends I made at that workshop that we were hosting. And at the end of the workshop, my friend, one of the guy was like, "Yo, I wish there was a website where like we could talk about trying to not be trash." And then somebody else is like, "Let's not be trash." And like, I will buy a domain name of anything that sounds cool to me. Right. I made $2,000 because I bought the domain name Woke Latina because I heard somebody say it and it's and put it for sale. So I bought Let's Not Be Trash and we launched it. And the website is essentially, we write about patriarchy, politics, sex, race, and honestly, whatever comes to mind, but in a way that hopefully is digestible and approachable. And the formula that like I like to use particularly when I'm writing about patriarchy, you can usually tell because I'm writing about myself first. I think a lot of people talk to men about patriarchy and sexism and they're preaching at us or they're telling us how bad we are. And I'm like, no, like I'm going to tell you about the dumb things that I did or the way that I felt. And like, hopefully from hearing that, you can get the lesson. And it's been really, once again, really healing because it gives me a chance to face myself and like really pull those lessons out. And sometimes it's be like, oh man, Stanley, what were you thinking? I got one I'm probably going to publish next week. It was originally on another publication, but it's called That Time I Thought I Was Gay. I did not think I was gay. I had a friend who was cool, and I stopped being friends with him because other people thought he was gay. And just like problematic and homophobia and how like a part of toxic masculinity is shaming people because of their sexuality.
Listen, one thing I've always appreciated about you and our friendship is the fact that you are just so vulnerable and candid about your emotions, about your thoughts, about, things that you're navigating. So I really appreciate that. even as you're talking today during this interview, I just thank you for just really being vulnerable. Um, I want to read something from the book. It's actually one of my favorites from the book. Okay, are you ready? And yes, maybe I am in love with the concept of love, but what's wrong with that? Love plays such a big part of our lives. Why wouldn't it? This book doesn't even begin to tell of my struggles, and it probably won't see my triumph. But if another girl breaks my heart and another friend laughs at me for trying too hard, it won't change who I am today, yesterday, or who I plan to be forever. The ultimate sucker for love. I hope my future wife can handle it. Don't shake your head. It's good. I remember when we were talking about that. You're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was writing all this stuff. But I love it. I love it, Stanley. It's indicative of how you were when I first met you, and to like even how you are now. You don't let society, people's perceptions, stigmas, etc., impact how you're moving. And I always appreciated you for that. That is one of my favorite lines from the book. What are your thoughts about it now, today in 2024, while listening to it?
It's so corny, but that is me. I like the fact that I'm corny a lot more today than I did back then. So it's cool.
You're not corny, Stanley. We just had this conversation about, speaking about yourself in a positive light. So we're not going to say that you're corny.
Okay, Marcus, that's my therapist's name.
I'll do that today. Go ahead.
No, yeah, yeah. I love the world. I love people, and I want to be loved, and I want people to love me. And there's nothing to be ashamed of about that. I'm not particularly religious, but I do believe that like we have the opportunity to put goodness and godliness into the world, right? Because humans have a limited potential. And I want to put love into the world. I want to love. I want to have radical love. I want to love you when there's nothing you can do about it. I want to love you in spite of you, because I know that's the love that I need. And if I need that, and once again, I am not special. I am not perfect. I am not different. I know you need it too. I know that if I think about my flaws and I think about my mistakes and I'm hard on myself, and that sometimes all I really want is somebody to hold me down and be like, it's okay, or I got your back, then I got to get out to the world. So yeah, Stanley back then didn't have this language, but like he knew what it was. He knew what the vibes were. And I stand with him all 10 toes.
Okay, 10 toes down. What would you say to young, impressionable Stanley?
Oh man. I would just say I'm proud of you. I love you. Don't be afraid to be you. Keep going. And maybe stop complaining about the friend zone.
Correct, because you mentioned the friend zone.
I would also tell him to invest in Apple. Just
Okay. All right. Well, Stanley, I want to thank you for your candidness again. I want to thank you for just being open and vulnerable with us. I want to thank you for writing Confessions of a Sucker for Love. I know you often say, oh, this isn't my greatest work. Stanley, we appreciate it. I appreciate it. I enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed rereading it in preparation for this. And it has been really a pleasure to watch you go through your journey, your continuous journey. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for the work that you do. And please keep us updated. What's the best way to stay updated with your work, with your writing and your publications?
So the best way, thank you, first of all, Katherine, thank you very much for like being a part of this process, for reading the book, for being my friend and supporting my work. Listen, writing is one of the loneliest crafts you can have, because you spend a lot of time by yourself and then you post your work, and sometimes you're reading the work by yourself. So I always appreciate when my friends show up for me, when they read my work, when they share my work, when they celebrate it. So thank you for that. And folks can, if you want to hear from me, sent the wrong link. The best ways to do it is at my newsletter. And I'll drop the link in there so that folks, they can share it, but it's letsnotbetrash.com. Let's, L-E-T-S, not the letter B, trash.com. And I'll just drop the link there, and hopefully you guys can share it. You can subscribe and and get my weekly emails. I publish every Tuesday. Yeah, that's where I'm at. That's where the work is.
You know,
That was the wrong link. It's the next one.
You know what, Stanley? I forgot one thing. We spoke about this yesterday. You actually went back and rewrote certain chapters of a Confessions of a Sucker for Love, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Tell us about this.
So,
Briefly, but go ahead. Tell us about it.
when I started the newsletter, I was like, what am I going to write about? So I was like, well, you know, what if you did a remix of Let's Not Be Trash with like where you are now? So I took some of the stories in there and wrote it, changed a few more things because like it was a little bit too autobiographical last time, changed a few things, and then posted it on my Substack. So the newsletter, like, it's called Sucker for Love Mixtape, Things I've Learned from the People Who Dumped Me. And I like break down some of those relationships, talk about what happened, but then also like put a lot more energy into talking about the lessons learned and what I learned from it. Like the friend zone is not a real thing and therapy is important, but don't just show up to therapy. You got to do the work afterwards. Because if not, you just paying somebody to hear you complain.
Not be lame. But yeah. Are those writings, are those revised stories, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, are those currently available on Substack right now if people want to go and read it?
Yeah, there's over like, it's a lot of, it's like the very beginning. Like you're going to have to scroll back a little bit. There's been like 4 years of weekly posts, but it's all there.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I know for myself, I'm going to go and check that out this weekend because I love to see your growth, especially as a writer. So thank you again, Stanley. Thank you, Tropicalfete, for having both Stanley and I. This actually concludes the final episode under Tropicalfete's Authors Connecting program in celebration of Caribbean American Heritage Month. I hope that everyone was able to tune into at least one of the other great interviews that took place this month. Please follow Tropicalfete on social media if you're not following them, and be sure to attend their events, especially this Sunday. Tropicalfete is having their Carnival Festival to conclude Caribbean American Heritage Month at Brooklyn Public Library, the Central Library, located at 10 Grand Army Plaza. That's between Flatbush and Eastern Parkway at 2 p.m., not 10. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your support. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you at future events. Take care.
Peace.
Thank you, Stanley.